Pam Bondi entered the hearing room under glaring lights and sharper expectations. Senators had gathered not just to review her resume but to probe her independence and judgment. Every exchange carried the weight of a larger debate about law, loyalty, and political accountability. She was expected to prove that her oath to the Constitution outweighed any personal or partisan allegiance. What followed was not a calm assessment of credentials but a storm of sharp questions, evasive answers, and moments that will be remembered as much for their tone as their substance. The questioning began with a reference to one of the most controversial chapters in recent political history, the 2020 election.
Presidential general election. You traveled to Philadelphia to appear alongside President Trump's then attorney, Rudy Giuliani. And together, you falsely asserted that President Trump had, quote, won Pennsylvania in that election. Now, I want to be clear, at that moment, there were still at least 1 million ballots left to be counted in Pennsylvania. Of course, President Biden went on to win the state by more than 80,000 votes. But in the following days, even after the results were clear, you continued to double down on the big lie, promoting falsehoods about election fraud and cheating without offering any actual evidence. And I remember it clearly because I served as California Secretary of State at the time, and I invited anybody associated with the Trump campaign who was making these claims to come forward with evidence of irregularities in the election or massive voter fraud. 4 years later, I still have seen none. So I ask you today, do you have any evidence of election fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election?
So, First Senator.
Yes or no? It's a yes or no question.
First Senator.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
First Senator. I'm so sorry about the fires to you and Senator Schiff and what you're going through in your states. I have to say that.
I appreciate that.
All
My
of our,
clock is
I'll
ticking, and I want to hear
all of our
your answer.
hearts go out to everyone in California for what you're facing right now. I'm glad you asked the question about Pennsylvania.
It's a yes or no question.
I was hoping
Do you have evidence,
someone
yes or
would.
no?
Senator, I was hoping you'd ask the question.
Do you have evidence, yes or no?
I traveled to Pennsylvania.
Do you have the evidence, yes or no?
I traveled, Senator, to Pennsylvania.
Okay. You're not answering my question. If you have no evidence to offer, let me ask you this. Will you now retract your previous statements that Trump won Pennsylvania in the 2020 election, yes or no?
Oh, Senator, I traveled to Pennsylvania, and let me tell you what I saw firsthand.
Yes or no?
I didn't talk about California because I was not in California. I talked about...
Yes or no? Last time I'm going to ask.
I talked about Pennsylvania because I was there.
I'm going to move on because she's clearly not answering my questions. And I want to know, colleagues, for everybody, members of the committee and everybody watching, that the attorney who stood beside Mr. Giuliani was making very similar statements. And he has since been disbarred from multiple jurisdictions for making these false claims about the 2020 election in court. And like Mr. Giuliani, as you've noted today, you've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution just as an attorney. And now you're asking us to consider you to serve as the chief law enforcement officer in our country. So it's imperative, Ms. Bondi, that you subscribe to facts and evidence and not politically convenient conspiracy theories. Your job will be, your job will be to protect voters and election workers, not to undermine and dox them. Now, I know that earlier you agreed that Joe Biden is in fact president, but many of the president-elect's inner circle continue to spread the big lie about the 2020 election. Then we'll move on to a different topic.
Senator, you were speaking. May I speak? You cut me off when I was speaking. When I ask you the next question, you can
speak, and I hope you answer, Ms. Bondi.
Well, I'd like to answer the previous one, Senator.
When we met yesterday,
you pointed your finger at me and said you were speaking.
You did not seem to be familiar
let me answer my question.
with
I'm not going to be bullied by you,
Senator
Senator
the 14th
Padilla.
Amendment of the United States of America, which was deeply disappointing.
I guess you didn't want to hear my answer about
today after I gave an opportunity to study overnight. So can you tell me and this committee what the Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment says?
Senator, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm not here to do your homework and study for you. If I am confirmed as Attorney General...
You're the one asking for a confirmation vote, ma'am.
Hey, you cut me off. Can I please finish?
What does the 14th Amendment say?
Senator, the 14th Amendment, we all know, addresses birthright citizenship. I've been a state prosecutor. I've been a state...
Senators reminded Bondi that the day after the vote she appeared in Philadelphia alongside Rudy Giuliani, declaring that the Republican candidate had won Pennsylvania. At that point, more than 1 million ballots had yet to be counted. When the count was complete, the Democratic candidate won by a margin of over 80,000 votes. Years later, sitting in the Senate chamber, she was pressed to account for her statements. Senator Alex Padilla demanded clarity, repeating one question over and over: did she have evidence of fraud or irregularities? He asked it again and again, framing it as a simple yes or no. Each time Bondi pivoted. She spoke about traveling to Pennsylvania, about what she had seen, about her sympathy for wildfire victims in California. But she never gave the direct answer Padilla insisted upon. The back and forth stretched into an almost uncomfortable standoff. To viewers, it revealed the divide between rhetoric and proof, between claims repeated in public and the demand for evidence in official settings. From there, the scrutiny widened. Senators raised concerns about whether she could ever act as an independent attorney general. Her ties to key figures in the previous administration, her history of public defense of disputed narratives, and her language of friendship when describing political allies all raised doubts. Padilla pressed the point: how could the chief law enforcement officer of the nation demonstrate neutrality if her record was so visibly partisan? Bondi countered with reminders of her time as a state prosecutor and attorney general. She insisted she was bound by oath, not party, and emphasized her years of experience. Yet the skepticism did not fade. Promises of independence, senators argued, mattered less than a proven record of it. The tension grew as the exchanges became less about legal nuance and more about political theater. Padilla positioned himself as the voice of accountability, demanding receipts, demanding facts. Bondi's approach leaned on broader themes, framing herself as a protector of voters in the Constitution while avoiding the specifics she was being pressed for. To some it looked like strength, a refusal to be cornered. To others it seemed evasive, a performance designed to avoid directly confronting uncomfortable truths. Either way, the spectacle revealed the stakes: whether the nation's top law enforcement role would be filled by someone tethered to partisan talking points or someone who could rise above them. The spotlight then shifted. Rather than focusing only on election disputes, Padilla steered the conversation toward the Constitution itself, zeroing in on the 14th Amendment. He asked Bondi to explain the Citizenship Clause, the foundation of birthright citizenship. Her response made headlines. She said she wasn't there to do his homework. The remark was sharp, dismissive, and intended as a soundbite. It played as a show of confidence, a jab at a senator she implied was trying to lecture rather than inquire. Yet beneath the bravado was a problem. Constitutional literacy is not optional for an attorney general, it is fundamental. By turning the question into a quip, she projected swagger but raised doubts about her grasp of the very principles she would be sworn to defend. The clash embodied the broader dynamic of the day: Republicans leaning on defiance and personality, Democrats demanding legal clarity and detail. The constitutional standoff set the stage for an even more emotionally charged moment: the discussion of immigration. Padilla asked if she agreed with the statement that immigrants were poisoning the blood of the country. This time Bondi did not hesitate. She rejected the sentiment outright. She spoke of her great-grandparents arriving from Sicily, teenagers navigating Ellis Island with hope in their eyes. She reminded the committee that America is a nation of immigrants and insisted she did not believe newcomers were poisoning the country. For once the exchange moved away from deflection and into a clear stance. She drew a line, rejecting extremist rhetoric while still anchoring herself within conservative credentials. Yet even this response carried its risks. By rejecting hardliner anti-immigrant rhetoric, she risked alienating factions of her own party that have made the issue their loudest rallying cry. At the same time, her earlier evasions on election questions and the 14th Amendment left moderates unconvinced of her independence. It was a tightrope act: be tough enough for the base, but moderate enough for skeptics. Each step carried the risk of falling to one side or the other. The strategy was clear. When pressed on loyalty, she leaned on her oath and her resume. When pressed on constitutional detail, she used swagger and deflection. When pressed on immigration rhetoric, she positioned herself as pragmatic, refusing to indulge in extremist language. It was an attempt to present herself as tough but fair, conservative yet not extreme, independent but loyal where it mattered. For her critics it revealed contradictions, for her defenders it showed resilience under fire. By the end of the hearing, the narrative was set. Bondi's testimony became a symbol of the larger struggle in American politics, the clash between law and loyalty, truth and narrative, accountability and performance. Her refusal to give a yes or no on election evidence left some convinced she was avoiding the truth. Her jab about not doing homework gave others pause about her command of constitutional essentials. Her rejection of anti-immigrant rhetoric, however, allowed her to claim a mantle of moderation. The question remains, did she succeed in proving her independence, or did she only deepen doubts about it? For some, her composure under intense questioning was proof of leadership. For others, her evasions confirmed that she was not ready to serve as the nation's top law enforcement officer. Either way, the hearing revealed the deep fractures that define today's political landscape. It showed how a single testimony can reflect the broader battle between extremism and moderation, between loyalty to allies and loyalty to law. Pam Bondi left the hearing not with the closure of certainty, but with the shadow of questions still hanging overhead. Her words will be replayed in soundbites, her exchanges dissected in headlines, and her strategies analyzed in the court of public opinion. Whether history remembers her testimony as defiance or evasion will depend on where you stand in the ongoing struggle over America's democratic principles. For now, one thing is certain: she did not walk out of that room having silenced her critics. Instead, she left the country debating the same fundamental question with which the hearing began: was she truly defending the Constitution, or was she only defending herself?